Speakcies.
Welcome to Origin of Speakcies, episode 148. I'm Steve here with my good friend Scott. Before we get going, please like and subscribe on YouTube and Rumble. Leave us a 5-star rating and a positive review on Apple Podcasts. And give us your money. Go to Speakcies.com/store where you can buy all sorts of Speakcies gear, shirts, wall art, masks for whenever COVID 3.0 or 4.0 or 2.2, whatever it is, comes back. You'll be prepared and you'll look good. And
Squirrel covers?
Not yet. Well, listen, this is our, we have, including this episode, after this episode, 2 more episodes. So we said that, we want people to tune into the end till episode 150. And we'll have some big announcements and maybe squirrel covers.
I could use, so whenever I wear a mask with this beard, it looks weird. I could probably use a squirrel cover instead.
It does. It looks like a Hustler magazine that got way out of hand.
I know. I've been, trust me, every time I put one on, it looks like the Amorica CD album, or actually worse than that, a CD cover. Hey, real quick before you get started, this is your deal. You're doing the intro. I really quickly wanted to let you know, I haven't even told you this, but some bad news. So we've already announced that the show is coming to a close. But I did have something else happen to me that I want to announce today. Sorry to make it weird, but
yeah.
So today I got my first mosquito bite of the season. So mosquitoes are back, and I don't know why I think that it's not going to happen, but I got it right here on the wrist. So it's time to get the citronella. It's time to get all that stuff out. The mosquitoes are back. So anyway, with that having been said, Steve, back to you. I just wanted to tell everyone that as of today, in what is it, May 12th that we're recording this?
Yeah.
The mosquitoes are back.
It's, you know what? I'm sad that you got bit, and I hope you don't get malaria. But in a way, it's good. You're kind of like the Punxsutawney Phil with the potential disease now that that summer's back. Even though the weather we've had here has not been very May-like. I don't want to be one of those people who's like, how about that global warming? When's it going to show up? But I'm pretty close to being that guy. It needs to warm up here. But that I think would be in my nature. And we're going to discuss tonight a term I've had on my list for a long time. It's a term I like. It's a term I'm a little bit worried actually describes me. But before we get to that, we also have a special Origin of Eatcies this evening. We'll be joined by Ron Romano of the McRib and Me podcast, where we will discuss, you guessed it, kale. Just kidding. McRibs and McRibs only. So we get to talk to someone who actually reached out to us after seeing Scott's Origin of Eatcies on McRib, which is one of my favorite segments I think that we've ever done. And have a great discussion with Ron. You'll learn more about him and his podcast, McRib and Me. So the subject of our show today is the word misanthrope. We're going to discuss its meaning, how it was popularized by a French playwright, and also it gives me an excuse to talk about one of my favorite all-time writers, a self-identified misanthrope, Miss Florence King, and the Miss is intentional. And also we'll ponder if I am a misanthrope.
Okay. Now, when I hear the word misanthrope, I think of the short story. I think it was a short story, Silas Marner. Do you remember that one? A miser and a misanthrope. But misanthrope, what does that mean, Steve?
So I'm glad you asked. So going to Merriam-Webster, definition of misanthrope, a person who hates or distrusts humankind. So I could see miser and misanthrope. It sounds like two things that don't necessarily have to go hand in hand. You can be cheap and very friendly, or you could be cheap and distrust humankind. Now, I don't like the use of hates in that. Hate is a pretty strong word that I like to reserve just for certain inanimate cabbages or people that I'll talk to you about offline. Like I don't like to commit, on recordings to who I actually hate. So I didn't like the term hate. So I went to Cambridge Dictionary. And their definition is someone who dislikes and avoids other people. So I felt like that's a little bit, I don't know, maybe gets a little bit closer to what I am. I don't think I'm a misanthrope, and I don't want to spoil the ending of this, but I'd say if there was like a spectrum of misanthropy, I'm on it somewhere. There's somewhere on there.
I've known you for a long time. You don't hate people. I think that you are a very gracious, kind person. You do nice things for people. A lot of people don't know all the stuff Steve does for people. Steve likes people, but groups of people. Sorry, I know I'm complimenting you, but it's true. But groups of people, I've known you for a long time, and you've never liked groups of people from my experience.
Yeah, and it's strange because it is very true, as we discussed with Sam Ramsdale. I was at the world's largest football game in Bristol, Tennessee a few years ago. So I actually hold a world record for being around the most people at a football game. But other than, I think, football games and rock concerts, being around large groups of people doesn't do too much for me.
Do you I actually don't know the answer to this, and we've never talked about it, but do you consider yourself an introvert?
Oh, definitely.
Okay.
100% an introvert. That's what the irony of like whatever it is that we do here is. After this, I will get into bed and go right to sleep. I will be just exhausted. I'm doing that. So I'm like a performance related introvert. Like I can perform as an extrovert when I need to, but it's not my preference.
I feel like as an introvert, you almost have to, right? Like you don't have to, but you kind of have to.
Well, if you'd like to have a job and move out of your house or your
Right.
mom's house, at least, it's good to do that. So the term means someone, again, I'll go with the softer definition, someone who dislikes and avoids other people. I wouldn't talk about myself, but probably the more accurate definition of it is a person who hates or distrusts humankind. So going back to Merriam-Webster to see the root of this, misanthrope comes from the Greek misanthropos, meaning hating humankind, and was very likely popularized by the French playwright Moliere's Le Misanthrope, which depicts a bitter critic of society who chooses exile over contact with other people.
Okay.
So gets right to it. And it's always, and you're going to learn more about this French playwright here in a few minutes. Continuing from Merriam-Webster, in English, misanthrope has been applied to many a perceived antisocial crank, from satirist Jonathan Swift to philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche to Charles Dickens' character Ebenezer Scrooge.
Oh, okay. So their character, you're not saying Jonathan Swift was a misanthrope, but he had characters that were.
Actually, he will, and he is, or he's considered by many. And that was something that I didn't get too far in because I think it's something that's kind of hard to define, like who exactly is a misanthrope.
Right.
I think with a character like Scrooge, it's pretty obvious, but of course he's
archetypal.
Fictional. Yeah, and he's built to be that way. But if you look up famous people or famous misanthropes, Jonathan Swift comes up quite often.
Really?
And
Jonathan Swift is in like my Hall of Fame, like, for authors and just people that have contributed to society. If you haven't read A Modest Proposal recently, dust it off. It's relevant.
I will. And I know that book is a big inspiration for Tyler Perry's Medea's Family Reunion. Not a lot of people know that, but that's actually a fact. And actually, my writer that I'm going to talk about, one of my all-time favorite writers, Miss Florence King, published a book about misanthropes, and discussed Jonathan Swift, but said she didn't count him because she speculated there was some disease that he had, the name of which escapes me, that affected his personality, that made him perceive that way. So he really wasn't a true organic one like she is.
Like she is.
Okay. Yeah.
Good. Better Florence King or Florence Henderson after your research?
Florence King. Florence King's
really
wonderful.
Okay.
You hear so much about her.
Great.
So this is one of those that's pretty clear where this was popularized by a French playwright by the name of, who had a writer's name, a nom de plume, if you will, of Moliere, spelled Moliere.
He did what? Tartuffe. What was the? Yeah, Moliere. Yeah,
he did. Yeah, and that's one of his plays. We'll go through a list of some of his plays here in a little bit. He was somebody. Well, let's actually talk a little bit more about who he is from Wikipedia, so you know it's good. Jean-Baptiste Poquelin, known by his stage name Moliere, was a French playwright, actor, poet, widely regarded as one of the greatest writers in the French language and world literature. So a little bit about Moliere here shortly, but first let's talk about his play, The Misanthrope, or The Cantankerous Lover.
Ooh, that's a good. That would be a good song name.
Yeah, it's a tremendous song name. So going to a summary of the play that I found on Wikipedia. So again, putting a lot of research and effort into this. The star, the protagonist is a character who is a misanthrope, Alceste, who refuses to make nice with the other people around him, and makes them, of course, tremendously unpopular. So he does that, drives people away from him, but finds someone else, Celimene, a consummate flirt who has courtly manners that Alceste despises. And I'm fairly certain that with every word I'm saying, I'm mispronouncing it.
I
But
think actually you say that all the time, and most of the time I'm like, yeah,
Mhm.
good to call that out. I think you're
Yeah.
kind of nailing it so far.
Well, good. Well, hopefully that didn't jinx it. So he tries to change Celimene, and she refuses to change. He wants to make her basically a misanthrope like him. That somehow there's a little bit of romantic angle here as other people are competing for the affections of Alceste, um, for reasons I can't tell by reading
I
this
was going
play.
to ask like what's the draw,
I've
but
read
I'm
this
assuming
over and
money,
over.
miser.
No, may probably.
Yeah.
So eventually gets to a point that gives her an ultimatum to marry him, but run away with him and hide from the rest of society. She refuses to do that, and the play ends with him deciding to exile himself from the rest of society. And despite the really poor summary that I've provided on this, it's a popular play. Again, it got the word misanthrope into the popular consciousness. But perhaps most importantly, it gives me excuse to read a list. So, Scott, you
Ooh.
know there are a few things in life that make me happier, despite
Mhm.
me being on the misanthrope spectrum, than reading a list. I love a good list. So, we're going
Yes.
to read a list of some plays by Moliere. So, the first in French is Le Médecin Volant, translated to The Flying Doctor.
That's yeah, that's the predecessor to the Flying Nun, or like the spin-off.
It's pretty close, and especially in 1645, that's impressive.
The Flying
So,
Doctor.
continuing with the medical theme, another play, Le Docteur Amoureux, translated as The Doctor in Love.
This guy loves
He
doctors.
does, and we'll see a little bit why
Mhm.
here shortly. So, I'm going to quit butchering the French titles and just tell you the English titles, which are
Mhm.
pretty good on their own. Uh, The Affected Young Ladies, maybe not his strongest, and affected, not infected.
No,
A
not infected.
Not infected,
Okay.
affected.
Affected. Got it.
But the fact that they were French, infected is
Well,
probably on, maybe there was a pun he was going for there.
I first thought you said the effective young lady. I was like,
No,
interesting. French effective French young ladies.
yeah. So, another play they had was The Imaginary Cuckold.
Wow, he was in early money on
Yeah,
the cuckold
and there
phenomenon.
sounds like there's some weird search on Pornhub that would probably bring up
Yeah,
something if you did that. So
yeah.
then he had a series of plays that were interrelated that I find very interesting.
Mhm.
The first, from 1661, is The School for Husbands.
Interesting. Again, this goes back to we've hit on this. Whenever you have
Mhm,
one of these lists with one of these old playwrights,
mhm.
there's a lot of like marital themes
Yeah,
about it's like remember it's like the obedient wife, the challenged husband.
yeah.
It definitely was a theme.
So first there was The School for Husbands. A
Yeah.
year later, The School for Wives.
Wow.
Going for a franchise here.
He is the Medea of French playwrights or
He
writers.
might be. I
Mhm.
think we can see why Tyler Perry, looks to him so much.
Yeah.
So we've had The School for Husbands, The School for Wives, finally, critique of The School for Wives. Pretty
Okay.
meta. Maybe I and again, know nothing of these plays. Was
This is his why did I what is it? What's the one? Why did I Marry My Husband or whatever. The other, I think that was a Tyler Perry joint also.
Yeah. Lots of them.
I butchered that, but there's
no, it's okay.
You know what I'm saying?
No, I know what you're saying. Listen, and this is, I don't know how much I've told you this is true. My daughter and I have spent several Friday nights not watching movies, but watching Tyler Perry trailers over and over again.
So you may or may not believe this. I thought of you today with that because I was in a meeting and the person leading the meeting kept saying a very cliche work speak term over and over. And I messaged one of my friends and I said, actually, I emailed one of my friends and I said, say this one more time with like the Medea caption. And I was thinking about Medea and I was like, I think Steve really actually likes Medea. Like you always talk about Medea. I was like, I said, I guarantee that you watch it with your daughter. And I literally thought that earlier today. So you just confirmed it.
The step we haven't taken is actually watching a full film because we enjoy the trailers for all the movies and plays that Tyler Perry has.
The trailer for Gymkata. I mean, do you even need to see Gymkata? I mean,
I've seen Gymkata. It's awful. The trailer for Gymkata is, I think Western civilization started on its downturn after that trailer, to be honest with you, because there's nowhere else for it to go except down.
But sometimes, the point being, sometimes trailers are all you need. And I believe it. No offense to Tyler Perry, but I do believe that the Medea trailers, I can see the appeal.
Oh yeah, definitely. And if you ever need some time to kill, let me know and I'll hook you up with some good ones.
Will do.
So speaking of kill, earlier we discussed Moliere's early obsession seems with doctors, the Flying Doctor and the Doctor in Love. Maybe he was thinking a lot about doctors because he suffered from pulmonary tuberculosis.
That doesn't sound good.
No, it's not good. And the circumstances of his death, and again relying on Wikipedia, became legend. He collapsed on stage in a fit of coughing and hemorrhaging while performing the last play he had written, which had lavish ballets performed to the music of Marc-Antoine Charpentier, and which was ironically titled The Imaginary Invalid.
Wow.
So
that is epic. That is epic.
We had an imaginary cuckold.
We
had an imaginary invalid. So I don't know what that says about the rest of his life. But basically, he died. And going back to some another influence he had, not only on literature and representing the French culture, the superstition that green brings bad luck to actors came from his death, as he was wearing green at the time.
As I'm wearing my green hillbilly Speakcies
shirt. And you know what?
Bad luck for me.
If someone likes that shirt, go to speakcies.com/store where you can get that shirt and tons of others. Some of the new shirts we've added recently include a Mindy the Dog shirt, a True Facts with Robert Banquette shirt, and also a shirt from Scott's solo podcast, Personal Records.
Yeah, man. I am looking forward to getting my Personal Records t-shirt in the mail to represent my old podcast.
It's a great show.
Yeah.
All right. So before I talk about one of my favorite all-time writers, Miss Florence King, and maybe my favorite misanthrope of all time, and before we talk to Ron Romano of McRib and Me podcast, Scott, you wanted to share something.
I did. So we are going to get to our very special Origin of Eatcies with Mr. Romano and more McRib talk, which we are very excited about.
Yeah.
I have one of those things. So Steve, you are the keeper of the denounce list.
Yes.
Okay. So I have something that's very specific. Now, normally we talk about denouncing things like Hitler, you know,
racism,
murder, things Eskimos, things that we need to take a stand against, Mellencamp. But this is a very specific situation. But when I tell you this story, I'll give you, this is me. I'm going to give you a little background before I'm not just going to go into it. I need you to tell me if this makes the list, and I will respect your decision because you're the arbiter here. Okay. Let's start with this. Can we agree that now, Steve, you've been in probably thousands of meetings, correct?
Yes.
As have I. Setting a meeting for 8 a.m. on a Monday morning is one of the worst things you can do. Now, if you're a high-powered executive and you're taking meetings, on the plane or something, that's different. But for the most part, would you agree that that's a faux pas?
It's a massive faux pas, and there needs to be an exceptional reason for that.
Yeah. 8 a.m. on a Monday. So I had a situation happen this last Monday, that I believe is worse than that. And this story I'm going to tell, it's somebody that does, I think, listen to the podcast, but this was so egregious that I don't care if they hear it. So first of all, let me set the story. I was on Sunday night. I had one of those nights where I had eaten something, and you ever just wake up at like 2 a.m. and your stomach hurts, and you're like, "Oh no, it's going to be one of those nights."
Yeah,
and you don't get the best night's sleep. There's a lot of trips to the bathroom. I had one of those nights, and almost to the point of thinking I may have to. I mean, it's weird calling in from home. I work from home most of the time. But it's almost one of those days where I was like, I'm going to have to like tell my boss, but I didn't. And I got up Monday morning, but I cut it pretty close. I got up, maybe like 7:45. I grabbed my laptop, fired it up. Couldn't do coffee because just the stomach was not right. Kind of got a little comfortable. It had the laptop up. It's 8 a.m. on a Monday. I'm not, I will say I wasn't necessarily in my normal work setup. I was kind of more so relaxing. I got a FaceTime at 8 a.m. on Monday morning.
To report someone's death or an assassination of a public official?
Thank you. Exactly. So my first thought is, my child, there's something bad has happened with my kid. My second thought is there's like an Amber Alert. Like I can't think of any reason for this to happen. I look at my phone. It's somebody I haven't spoken to in at least 6 months. And I did not answer because I didn't want to.
Yes.
And because I'm like, there's nothing that's important enough for this for this person to be FaceTiming me at 8 a.m. on a Monday. And so I let it go. And it went on for a while too. You know how FaceTime's like, you have to shut it off. And I was annoyed. Then I get a message from this person's husband, which says, "Hey man, we're at your house dropping off a book you loaned the wife. I don't know if there was knocking. If there was, I didn't hear it. My dog didn't bark. But I had a problem with this for many reasons. And here's my first one. Number one, why does it take both of you to come drop off a book at my house? Yes, I do remember lending this book to the person. But first and foremost, what are you doing at 8 a.m. on a Monday, returning a book to me? And now, if you're going to do it, put it in the mailbox. Drop it on the thing. Text me later. You don't FaceTime me at 8 a.m. on a Monday. So I am proposing that in addition to all of the isms, kale, Mellencamp, that we add to the list 8 a.m. FaceTimes on Monday morning to our denounce list. So what do you think?
The only hesitation I have of adding that to the list is it's something that shouldn't have to be addressed.
True.
At all. We know that racism's out there. It's part of our history. It's something we need to deal with. We know that there are people that worship the devil. That's why we have to talk about kale.
Sure.
This is something that shouldn't even be an option.
You're right.
This is like when I found out a football player was a multi-million-dollar football player was fighting dogs. I'm like, how many other things have you checked off your list before dog fighting becomes an issue? So, I mean, trust me, it is denounced, but I'm going to have to take a look inside my soul.
Well, and this is why I brought it to you. And that's a good point. It's almost beyond the pale, episode 24, I think. it's almost beyond the pale to the point where it shouldn't have to be on a list.
Yeah.
But you would agree with me that that was completely there was no cause for that, and I'm seriously questioning. I mean, this is a friend of mine, but that's like FaceTiming somebody at 8 a.m. on a Monday is, I think, grounds almost for ending a friendship. And I'm not being a misanthrope, I don't think here.
Yeah.
That's pretty bad. Like, I would never do that. But so at least, okay, if it's not going on the list though, you would agree that
it is so, let me put it this way. It's so bad that I don't even know if we should document it.
Okay, good. All right. Well, anyway, the person you are, I hope you're listening. We can maybe make amends at some point, but for now, you're on my list. Okay, we're going to do a very special Origin of Eatcies with Ron Romano of the McRib and Me podcast, starting right now.
Bacon?
No, I want my bacon. I gotta tell you something. Bacon is good for me.
All right, welcome back to another edition of Origin of Eatcies. Yes, the segment keeps going. It was going to be a one-off, but we're having too much fun with it. And this is a special Origin of Eatcies because we have a guest. You may have noticed if you're watching on YouTube. Our guest today is Ron Romano, the driving force behind the McRib and Me podcast, where Ron combines his love of music and McRibs by interviewing all sorts of great guests, a lot of musicians, by the way, whilst consuming delicious McRib sandwiches. Ron, thank you for being here.
Guys, Scott, Steve, thanks so much for having me. Look, the moment I saw your episode, I knew we were going to have to be friends. When I saw the McRib thing, I was like, I need to reach out to these guys. We got to get together because it's a bonding, McRib creates bonds all across America.
It's another compliment to Roger Mandingo, just bringing people together in many ways.
Is the same in the same way that the bits of meat from the heart and other places get molded together into a delicious McRib. We are being molded together in the McRib family.
I mean, after you saying that, I'm hungry. How about you guys?
Okay.
That made me hungry.
I'm always hungry, but here's my first question. Here is going to go right into it because I was wondering about this. I was watching your podcast and I noticed that, one of the things that Ron does on the podcast, as I mentioned, is eats a delicious McRib, and you kind of pull it out of a cooler. What do you do when it's not McRib season? Are you freezing these McRibs? Do you have a connection? In which case, let's talk after this. Yeah. What's happening there?
Yeah, well, unfortunately, I don't have any connection when it's not available, but that's a great question. We are working on with my podcast some ways to do some more content. I spoiler, I have frozen some from the last time. Okay, so
I figured that.
We've got some things coming out down the road there with some frozen McRibs for sure, and that. But much like you guys, you start to expand in some other little ideas,
right.
and really for me, I think with McRib, it's like one of my favorite things. So we'll probably have some people on, and let's have them bring some of their favorite things that maybe I need to try, and we'll go that way, right? Kind of a what's your favorite things kind of thing, and we're gonna work in some little quizzing, some contests, some things out there, so to kind of keep it rolling, and when it's not in season. But yeah, it's a great question, and the hard part is while I'd love to have McRib all the time, part of it's mysterious. When you come back is part of the fun, right? So we don't want to spoil that either.
Do you have a theory about? So I had read some different things about the McRib season, so to speak. And I heard that franchise owners had some leeway. There's all sorts of theories. There's theories that the McRib comes out when like pork is cheap, which I don't think is real. Yeah. Do you have any theories on that?
I really don't, but I can say that and why I loved your podcast. The overriding theory that I've heard was the pork price theory, right? That seems to be one of the most prevalent ones on the internet, which is again why I loved your episode. You kind of dug past that a little bit because that McDonald's, like I said, they can kind of probably drive that however they need to. Personally, I think they love the marketing myth of it as well, and it's got such a cool cult following. But yeah, I don't really necessarily have any myths. I will say last time McRib was here, I did ask when it was going to be done, and they couldn't tell me at the store. When I went to the restaurant, they're like, it just happens one day. We don't have them anymore.
Yeah.
Which was, I honestly, I was racing, and we could get into the story a little bit about how the podcast got started, but I was trying to get episodes shot before it disappeared, and every day I'd book people, and we'd have to go check in at McDonald's and make sure we could get them that night as it got near what we thought was the end of the season.
I love it. I love the fact that you're trying to book guests and you're like, look, I don't know when McRib season's over. Yeah. Let's try to get this. I like to envision that somewhat like when there's like a new Pope announcement, that there's some sort of like corporate McDonald's smoke just starts coming out of some sort of, like doves get released. There's got to be some, epic way that you find out that the McRib's coming out, and then also when it's over.
Yeah. And as you guys mentioned, I've been a fan of McRib Locator, right? So we try to use that as a tool to find out when, and then of course the other market following them on their socials and things. But McRib Locator is a huge resource for us fans, right?
I did check it out recently, and it looked like Kentucky or Indiana, there were some claims of McRibs. Not verified, so I don't know.
Are they Bigfoot sightings? Like someone's seen one, and it's always a guy that's your uncle that's had too much to drink that lives in the middle of nowhere. He's seen them.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and I think he McRib Locator looks for verification with a receipt copy. I think, right?
I believe that's how they do verify, but I don't know what the vetting is for the claim. Need to get a little deeper into that, and I will. So Ron, I want to ask you about the podcast, obviously, and your background and sort of kind of what you're up to. But first, I do think I want to get into just talk a little bit more about the beauty of the McRib, if we can just start there. And I guess let's start with this. Do you remember your first McRib? I mean, that's a tough question. Now I know you're out there on your bike, having just good times. Did you go get a McRib on your bike? Do you remember your first McRib, or has it just been one of those things that you've always loved?
Yeah, no, it's a great question, and I have, because I'm such a fan of it, really try to drill down into when that moment was, and I can't pin it, but here's something to research. My brother and I swear that maybe it was just our local restaurant. We swear that it was also released with a special edition felt tip pen.
Oh, wow.
Like a McRib or a McDonald's. And I have searched the internet and I have not been able to find anything. I would love to see if you ever come up with anything. But nonetheless, he and I have talked, and we sort of do remember that because I was 9 or 10 at the time. So, it's been a minute too. And of course, it was 81, 82 that everything came up. But we were trying to put a pin on that. But again, as you've probably seen in my episodes, for me, it's the magic of the whole experience, right? It's kind of like those visits to Disney that you might have had as a kid. McRib just became one of those things. I don't know if it was the time of life, like I've mentioned a lot of times. BMX, and it was the first restaurant I could get to on my bike without my parents, and McRib happened all at that time. So it's really just a magical thing all the way around for me. But yeah, good question. I do know that I've always loved it, wherever that started.
Yeah, it's like I can't remember my first Whopper, but sorry to cheat on McDonald's here for a second, but that was sort of, I don't remember riding my bike, but I remember when I got my driver's license, that was the thing that I was like, I can drive up the street and I remember they used to do, Steve, do you remember this back in I want to say in Virginia Beach, it was I want to say it was 50 cents Whopper. It was a really cheap Whopper you could get, which I could actually afford as a high school student. And I have nostalgia thinking about that because it was, it was great just going on your own.
And that's the thing, right? That's another kind of angle on my podcast. It's just nostalgia. And I relate it to music, right? I mean, I miss liner notes on a record, even on a CD or a cassette, right? It's that physical, tangible, nostalgic piece. And those things that you grew up with that have changed. There's the way books have changed, right? And having the hard copies and things like that. While I love a great audiobook, I'm not going to lie if it's read by the person that wrote it in particularly. But there's lots of things those tangible and nostalgia things. And for me, McRib is a nostalgic piece too.
Yeah. So why don't you tell us a little bit about your background? So I know that you record in Ocean Way in Nashville.
Yeah, yeah.
Are you an engineer? What's your background with music?
Yeah, so I've always been a huge music fan, and you know that all came from the '80s and all the alternative explosion, and from then on. And you know, I dabbled in some guitar. You know, of course, you move to Nashville, and that's a very humbling thing. You know, I say I'm really great at owning guitars. You know what I mean? There's a lot of huge talent here.
Mhm.
All respect to that, but just always loved music, and so over the years, I've also been kind of a tech guy, and for about the last 7 or 8 years, when I moved to Nashville, I've been doing tech work for recording and film studio spaces, and that, and good, you know, tech work at Ocean Way Nashville Studios, and become really good friends with the folks over there, and it gave me a great spot to be able to have the artists come and do that. And of course, you know, as you mentioned, alluded to earlier, I've mostly done music guests at this point,
Mhm.
but I'm into all entertainment guests. You know, we're hoping to get some actors, actresses, all those things, and we've had some that kind of do both. So any entertainment personality, I'm looking forward to. But yeah, I do have a huge heart in music and for music, and but I'm kind of an IT guy for the you know
Yeah.
the studio side of things these days. So that's my Ocean Way connection. And it's, you know, world-renowned studio, so it's a really cool thing right here in the heart of Nashville. It's, you know, they're always in one of those top three in the world places to go. So it's really, I'm blessed to have that.
Yeah, I think Steve and I were talking about how cool it is that, you know, you're able to kind of use that studio to sort of parlay that into this podcast. And I do really enjoy your podcast, and I like, there's been some really great musical performances. And now I know you're going to start doing some other things, but you've had Grammy Award winners on. You've had some great guests, and it looks like the feedback has been really good so far. I'm wondering what. So this is a two-part question.
Okay.
What was the, when you said, when you started telling people you were going to start a podcast, and and they said, "Oh, cool, what's it about?" And you said, "So it's called McRib and Me." What was the reaction from, I guess, friends, family, people? Maybe they already know how much you love McRib. And so the second part of that question is, do you find that you have been ridiculed, persecuted for your love of McRib? Um,
Hmm.
you know, so a little bit. I want to hear the reactions
Yeah.
people have had, and also just your own personal. Has there been any backlash?
Yeah, well, luckily there hasn't been any backlash because, you know, as when I decided to do this, I said, you know, here's the thing. First of all, it's just fun, right?
Yeah.
There's no harm done in anything we're doing. We're eating McRibs. You don't have to love them, but we're sure going to try them. And
Yeah.
I'm going to try and spread that joy. And we're just talking about music or entertainment and letting some people show their talents too. So that's been kind of the nice thing is that, you know, it's just a fun thing. And that was important to me. With all the things out there that go on, and, you know, politically or this or that, I just wanted to have something that was just pure fun and just
Yeah.
keep it in that lane, right, and keep it light. So that's so most people have. It's funny, really, when I tell them, you kind of first you kind of get the head turn. It's like,
Mhm.
oh, McRib, huh? And then they turn the other way and say, you know, that's a really great idea. You know, it's like we're always
Mhm.
looking for that little thing that makes something unique or niche. And for me, it's real. You know, I mean, look, I still play adult league hockey, men's league hockey,
Mhm.
and you know, I've had jerseys for years with Romano on the back. I'm the guy that now it says McRib on the back. You know, I'm known as that guy in you know, men's league hockey even. So you know, it all sort of adds up. And I've been that guy for a while before the podcast, right? You know, it's like,
Yeah.
hey, I pre-gamed with a McRib tonight, guys. Look out, I'm gonna be on fire, you know? So just always having fun like that. And you know, of course you can imagine in a kind of men's hockey group, the guys are chirping each other. So we have a lot of fun
Yeah.
with that. But nonetheless, it's, you know, and so after the fact, once I started doing it, the podcast, yeah, people have been like, wow, this is really good. I even got a comment back from one of the artists. One of their relations was like, "Wow, this is one of the best interviews we've ever." You know, they looked so comfortable on the show, and really had a great. You know, I got some really great feedback, kind of almost industry side too, and that. So it's been fun, and
Mhm.
again, it's it's have fun if just join in and love it.
I like that. And I appreciate your positive attitude and bringing something positive to, the internet, especially in such a negative time. And we'll also use this clip too. If you ever get in trouble for misgendering Grimace or the Hamburglar, we'll use this as a clip to say his intentions were always good.
That's right. Absolutely. My intentions are great. And thanks for that. That's true. But yeah, that's kind of where that, the feedback there.
Well, it is a great idea to break the ice. I was wondering, I was watching and I was waiting for somebody to say, I guess people know what they're getting into. It's not like you spring a McRib on them. Everyone seems to go for it and have the McRib. I like your idea of having people also bring something to you that they love, because that's what comes through is your joy about the McRib. Like, all kidding aside, it's great. I remember when we did our McRib segment and we got some different feedback from it. People enjoyed it. And Steve showed me your account and I was so happy. I was like, yes, another guy doing McRib stuff. Yeah. So I think everybody's kind of has their McRib, right? So is that so? Tell me more about where you think you're going to go with that. Can you talk about that?
Exactly. Not only does everybody have their McRib, but in this kind of interesting culture of limited edition releases and stuff, I think it's very timely that the McRib could be one of the original limited edition things for people to catch, right? Whereas that's a big thing in fashion or with artists, right? Limited release, Nike collab with Billie Eilish is a recent one, right? And that's so I kind of look at the McRib on a kind of a neat pedestal like that too. So it's everybody's got their favorite thing. What are your little luxuries?
Right.
I mean, I consider the McRib a luxury good. It's just it's one of those things that you can't always put your hands on, and when it comes, it puts a smile on your face.
It's a treat. You see that the McRib is back, and Steve will vouch for this. That was always my thing. That was I probably posted too much on Facebook back in the day, but I would always make sure to post.
Yeah.
Heads up, everybody.
Yeah.
McRib. Steve, do you have I know that I don't want to get you in trouble with the McRib guy here, but I know that I don't know if you've had one, or if you had, I know you're not necessarily the enthusiast that Ron and I are. Do you have your own McRib that
Well, compared to you two, no one is much of a McRib enthusiast, and I mean that in a good way.
Well, thank you.
What is my McRib? I have to say, I, for some reason, was unexpectedly happy when I saw Taco Bell was bringing back their taco pizza.
Yeah.
And I don't know what sort of drunk memory was triggered by that, because I don't think I can't even remember if I've ever had one, which probably gets back into the drunk memory aspect of things. But
yeah.
I like the idea of presenting someone a McRib as opposed to Taco Bell, because there's a chance no one's been drinking before the McRib discussion starts. But with a Taco Bell thing, I might even film that podcast at the Taco Bell. not remember that either.
What is kind of funny is generationally, I'm seeing some of the younger artists that I've interviewed, and I've got some other reviews that haven't come out yet. Some of them had never heard of it, which seems shocking.
Oh wow,
seems shocking.
Seems sad.
Yeah, and that's what I thought, and because I think it just sort of comes and goes, and I lived through the generation of the new Q, right, and all those right, and to reference again the great video you showed on yours. But I was surprised to learn that, because I'm like, what, everybody doesn't know about the McRib? I mean, how can that be? And generationally, I think there's some people that haven't been as exposed.
I loved the fact. See, I didn't know this, and you mentioned it on one of your podcasts, so you must have already known it. But it was an epiphany when I was reading that the chef Arend had done the nuggets first, and it kind of I liked knowing that, because when I do get crap from my friends, like I have a friend Micah who just thinks it's disgusting and is like, why would you eat that? But I bet he eats chicken McNuggets. So get off your high horse, is what I say.
Well, he's about to have a kid too, so he's going to get over his compressed meat problem's going to go away quickly. Those nuggets are going to be saving his life.
And Steve, you made a great point in that episode too about chicken McNuggets. I never thought that really changed a lot of culture, but just like you're saying, I mean, that's a huge thing that I mean, kids, right? You feed them chicken nuggets. I mean, that's
Yeah.
just the thing, and that all kind of began with that, right? So that was a really neat moment in when I was watching you guys' show that I was like, oh yeah, I never thought about that. But yeah,
Yeah.
and the other thing is and was it, don't let me butcher Dr. Roger Mandingo's description, right? You've been
Yes.
used to sausage with
Yes.
right? So I mean,
Yeah.
exactly. I mean, this self-validates really, right? I mean,
Yeah.
the McRib self-validates as a legitimate
100%. And by the way, I'm so glad that you enjoyed that the origin of Eatcies, and that we were able to connect to continue to share the love. And I hope we get more chance to do things together in the name of McRib and otherwise. I do have one last question for you, and it's going to be a tough one.
Okay.
And it's going to be one of those Solomon sort of split the baby type questions. But do you have what is your favorite part of the McRib? Your favorite aspect of the McRib, if you had to choose?
Okay, if I had to choose.
I mean, not that you're going to eat one
Yeah.
thing, but what do you love about the McRib? Just talk about how much you love the McRib, but what's your favorite part of the McRib, if you have a favorite, or are they all just your babies and you can't pick one?
Right. So when you say that, are we digging into the ingredients that make it up, or?
Well, where I'm going with it is the main part. So you've got the home style bun,
Right.
You've got the patty itself, you've got the sauce, you've got the pickles. So for me, I will say this was an excuse for me to say, to me, it's that sauce, man. If I get a McRib and they're light on the sauce, now if they miss the pickle, I'll live with it. But if they go light on the sauce, I might go back and ask for another one or complain. I mean, I actually might do that because I need that sauce.
Yeah,
I need it.
And you know what? I'd have to agree. And hopefully I didn't seem like I copped out by letting you go first there.
No, I told you it was gonna be a hard question, and I could see that you were like, I don't want to offend the the pork patty here.
But I can tell you that I'm okay if it's light on sauce, and I'm not saying that as a cop out either to say that I just love the thing no matter what. But yes, the sauce is huge, and I will say I noticed with my guests that the sauce is really one of the number one comments they usually get out too, as that being a key piece of what they like about it, and that. But again, and as I've probably said on the show, really the beauty of it to me is when you do get it right, the sauce is there, the pickles are the onions, and that bite with everything in it. I mean, that's magic. You don't just pull that off with, just without some tries, right? They mastered that. That chef put that together.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about it, and it bears repeating. Chef Arend I don't remember if he was Swedish. I think he was Swedish, but he was a French
trained
chef. Yeah. He stood his ground.
Yeah.
And he made it the way he wanted to, and he said, you know what? It's gonna have rib marks too. And he was gonna die on that hill. I mean,
yeah. And you know what? That is what makes it iconic, really. The patty, the shape of the patty, right? I mean, yeah, another huge win on that. So and the kind of reservoir thought of it holding the sauce and things, it's brilliant.
I think that's a great note to leave it on. Ron, hopefully we'll have a chance to chat more in the future and keep spreading the love. And again, people should check out your podcast. You can always just Google McRib and Me podcast. You're going to find it. But you should also check out Ron's Instagram, which if you're watching on YouTube, you see it's at McRib_and_me. And Ron, I think you're going to keep everyone up to date on what's next on your Instagram. Is that right?
That's correct. Yeah, we're just getting ready to revamp and kick things into a new gear. So thanks for letting people know where to find us. And Scott, Steve, I just adore your show. I love it. I've listened to a couple of the episodes since I've heard about you, the kale, the jump the shark, and what I love about it is like, God, just the things you guys say. Like Happy Days was that thing, when I came from school, it was just on the TV. I mean, that was the same thing, right? It was that, or you stayed home from sick, and it was like, remember Courtship of Eddie's Father? That seemed to be
absolutely
on TV, right? And those kinds of things. So I'm just connecting completely on the things that you guys are doing, and I love it. So I'm looking forward to. I'm going to pull you onto my show too, for sure.
Awesome.
We look forward to it, Ron.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Ron. Everybody subscribe to the McRib and Me podcast on YouTube, on Apple Podcasts. Make sure you follow his socials so you can see what he's up to next. Ron, thanks again. We appreciate your time.
Thanks, guys.
All right.
Bacon?
No, I want my bacon. I gotta tell you something. Bacon is good for me.
Thank you very much to Ron Romano for joining us. When you get a chance, check out his podcast, McRib and Me, at every major podcast provider, also YouTube, and search for him on Instagram at McRib and Me, and learn more about McRibs. And I'm actually intrigued by McRibs. I feel like, and you know what, something, Scott, I intentionally did not share with Ron when we spoke to him. And this is true. I've never had a McRib.
Yeah, I was glad you didn't bring that up because that's a big deal. And I mean, most people would probably side with you and say you're probably smart, but I'm not part of that group. McRibs are awesome. So
somehow it became an attack on me when I didn't say anything bad about McRibs, but it's okay.
No. I'm saying you need to try a McRib. That's it. You didn't do anything bad. I'm saying you probably have done the right thing by society's standards, but once you have a McRib, you'll understand, or you won't, or you'll hate it. And your next podcast will be about hating McRibs.
No, that would have to be a pretty bad experience, considering I haven't done one about kale, or have I?
You should do a podcast about the foods you hate. But I would be interested to see your if you do finally have a McRib. I think it should be either with Ron or somehow adjacent to his podcast.
Well, I think so, and that's what I'm looking for. I'm hoping Ron sees this and goes, this guy needs a plane ticket to Nashville. So, hint. Anyhow, let's talk about something that's positive. And by positive, I mean something that I find positive, which is someone who dislikes and avoids other people. So I want to talk about one of my favorite all-time writers, Miss Florence King. She is somebody, like sometimes people say, here's the best writer you've never heard of.
Yeah.
I think she's definitely known, but not like super popular. It's not like
I've never heard of it.
There's this band you've never heard of from the 90s you're going to like called Nirvana. Right. It's not one of those conversations. Right. She was somebody that I became very interested right before her death, or around the time of her death in 2016. And I mention her death as I'm going to quote a lot from her obituary in the New York Times, where she's described as a columnist, author, and professional misanthrope.
I'm intrigued.
Yeah. So I became a fan a few years ago when I read her memoir, Confessions of a Failed Southern Lady. It's basically, some people describe it as a novel, but it's not. It's about her. It's, there's a little bit of fiction in it, but mostly it's about her.
It's a memoir.
She hides some details about things. So, the New York Times describes her as a columnist, author, and professional misanthrope. Here's how she described herself. Miss King, first of all, she refused to go by Ms. And never was married. She described herself as a monarchist, a discreet, tweedy, long celibate lesbian, an erstwhile pornographer, and slightly to the right of Vlad the Impaler.
I mean, that's quite the bio.
It is. So she's somebody that wrote for major publications, wrote her own books, had a column for years called The Misanthropes Corner in National Review, which made some of her sexual adventures, I think, a little bit more interesting to be published for a long time in a conservative magazine. So Confessions of a Failed Southern Lady is the first book that got me into her. And I pretty much started devouring everything that she'd written, including one of her books, With Charity Towards None, A Fond Look at Misanthropy, where she discusses Jonathan Swift. And she is also the author of maybe the funniest novel I've ever read. And I say that without hesitation. You can find the best version of it is in the Florence King Reader, which if you go on Amazon or eBay, you can find for a pretty good price. She re-edited her novel when she published it in the Florence King Reader. And from other reviews I've read, it's a better version of the book. And it's the main character, Isabel French, is basically based on her. And it's a more conservative person from Virginia who ends up with a do-gooder liberal lady from Massachusetts, and they end up having a commune in California. And this all takes place in the late 60s, early 70s. And it's a book that still resonates today. It's hilarious, does give some insight into her calling herself an erstwhile pornographer, as one of the writing jobs she had is she would write romance novels. She called them bodice rippers, as there was some a woman, a character would end up being assaulted in every book.
Yeah.
That was apparently the thing.
Yeah.
The character of Isabel French actually writes for a pornographic magazine as part of the book, and things that cannot be repeated. But a hilarious book. And again, that's something that's always fun for me is somebody that, you throw in a little William Buckley and National Review with all this. It makes it a little bit better for me. So
I'm going to buy this book. This sounds incredible. I'm into it.
So let me just share a couple quotes from Miss King that I think really summon her up. And just before I get into that, one of the things I like about her too is she passed away in 2016. She's of a time where if somebody like now, if someone from the National Review passed away, regardless of who they were, Donald Trump would somehow be mentioned in their obit, even if they had nothing to do with them. And probably the inverse. If somebody for Mother Jones died, Fox News would find something about AOC to put in there. But here's just some quote. One of the things I like about her is people respect her, and she was no respecter of persons. She didn't like anybody, and I appreciate that. Here's just some quotes. No matter which sex I went to bed with, I never smoked on the street. She was a woman of class, despite what she did in the bedroom.
I love that.
I simply like guns because you can't shoot people without them.
Yeah.
Familiarity doesn't breed contempt. It is contempt.
That's good.
And a quote that I think would still resonate today. Feminists will not be satisfied until every abortion is performed by a gay black doctor under an endangered tree on a reservation for handicapped Indians.
Prophetic. Yes. She died in 2016, so that came before 2016.
Yeah, because now that I've read that, she'll probably be dug up for wherever she's buried. But if you get a chance, I would say for starters, Confessions of a Failed Southern Lady, tremendous book, great insight into her as a person and her style of writing. And When Sisterhood Was in Flower, great book, maybe the funniest novel. I'd put up there with Confederacy of Dunces as the funniest book that I've ever read. And get a chance to look it up, and we will try. I'm going to try to find some pictures to post over so you can see what she looks like. Great misanthrope, and somebody that didn't just say it, lived it. Died by herself in a assisted living home, never married.
Gosh,
kept the miss her whole life.
So I'd never heard of her before. Florence King. Couple quick comments from me on this is, number one, what I love about the idea of a misanthrope, and I don't know that I mean, people get labeled that, and I know this is different than xenophobic, which is annoying, but it's equal opportunity. You don't like people.
Yes.
Period.
A true misanthrope is not going to go, what does Fox News or CNN say?
That's right.
They're just not going to like people.
You just don't like people. The other thing is, I love a conservative gay. Now, I don't know. She wrote for National Review. Now, I don't get the, like, I know who Ivan the Impaler, who he
Vlad
is.
the Impaler.
Excuse me. Thank you. Vlad the Impaler. But I don't know his politics. I assume she's in that saying that she's conservative. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Love a conservative gay or lesbian. So I'm a huge fan of that. So yeah, I can't wait. I'm actually legitimately excited to start reading her stuff. So thank you. That's great.
Highly encouraged. And please check out our socials. If I can find any links to her works or maybe some compilations online, I'll do that for you. So kind of concluding with, if I'm a misanthrope, I'm going to stick with them on the spectrum. I think there is a distrust of mankind that I have. I think kind of, rounding up our season that we've just done, discussing cynicism with Giannis Papas earlier in the year, made me consider that being a cynic maybe isn't the best thing. I don't think being a misanthrope is the best thing. I'm a big trust but verify guy, especially when it comes to other people. But there's always something. Just when I think that maybe I'm straightening myself out and gonna have a positive view of humanity, someone will come out of nowhere and tell me a story about an 8 a.m. FaceTime and ambush at their house. So that's probably pushed me down one end of the spectrum a little bit more than I prefer.
Well, listen, if I can get you closer to Florence King, I've done my job. And as long as you're still my buddy, or at least pretend to be, then I'm good with it. So
certainly.
All right. Well, Steve, thank you very much. That was awesome. And also, we want to thank Ron Romano from the McRib and Me podcast. Just Google McRib and Me. You'll find him. We want to thank all of you for watching and listening to Origin of Speakcies. We have a couple more episodes for you. However, it's still a good idea to subscribe to the feed. And we will explain more later. So until next time, Bob's your uncle, and that's what I'm talking about.
Watch out for bears, and kale is from the devil.
Speakcies.